everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rumcast. This is the show where we talk all things rum with the people who love and shape the category, including sometimes ourselves, like on today's episode. I'm Will Hookinga, and joining me, as always, from America's basement, the sunny state of Florida, is John Gullo. What's up, John?
America's basement. Well, you know, I'm from Miami, and we don't always count that as a part of Florida. Sometimes it is,
true.
Sometimes it isn't.
That's true. Yeah, there's definitely like the difference as you go from North Florida to South Florida. Like it changes a lot. So, I think that's a line. I think it's a joke I stole from The Office. America's basement. It makes me laugh. So decided to sprinkle it
works.
in there. Yeah.
It works, and I'll tell you what, I'm gonna stick with that right now because, Will, I have to tell you, I'm a sucker. I have to confess to you.
Okay.
I'm a bit of a sucker.
In what way?
Well, I'm a sucker for good rum. Mm-hmm. So a rum sucker? No, that doesn't sound right. I'm a sucker for good rum, and
bad jokes.
Yes, and bad jokes. Yes, that's also true. So, anyways, I told myself that I wasn't going to buy this bottle of rum.
I've been there.
And I was presented with an opportunity to buy this bottle of rum yesterday.
Okay.
And guess what I did?
You bought it.
I bought it. And I was kind of a little bit ashamed and mad at myself for doing so.
Okay.
Because I was like, you know, I just have a lot of this rum, and I'll dispense with the surprise now. And it's Foursquare's Redoubtable.
Yeah. Okay. I've just started to see that popping up in my market.
Yes.
I think I know where you're coming from with that feeling of guilt, but walk me through it. Walk me through the emotional journey that went along with this purchase.
So, first of all, I have probably 15 or so bottles of Foursquare Rum in my collection.
Really? 15?
There's I don't, it's around there. I haven't counted, but there's a good amount now because I love open, Barbados right? rum, and yes, they are all open.
Okay,
every single one.
Okay,
I do not hoard any of those. In fact, I probably open them as soon as I get home every time.
I do the same thing,
which is what happened last night.
I see posts like in forums and stuff from people who are like saving this one for a special occasion, and I'm like, I have literally never been able to do that in my life with anything. Actually, the only bottle right now that I could say I'm saving for a special occasion is one that I don't have in my house because I had to have it shipped to your house because it was coming from Europe. It's that Velier Mount Gilboa release, and the only reason I'm able to save it is because I physically cannot open it because you're holding on to it for me. So hopefully you're not sneaking into
exactly.
it.
I was gonna say it's taken every ounce of me to put it in a place where I don't ever see it, so that I just forget about it, and then we'll hopefully get it to you at some point soon, and we can both share a dram of it. But
that would be great.
Yeah, so Redoubtable is the newest release in the ECS Exceptional Cask Series from Foursquare, and it was not cheap.
Yeah,
so
what about 120?
I had it for 135.
Oh, okay.
And I expected around 120 actually, Will. So when it was presented to me at 135, that's what, like, it not only was it like, do I already have enough of the Foursquare rum right now at home? It was also like, gosh, it's a little more expensive than I anticipated it to be. And that's where all this feeling came from, to walk you, as you said, through the journey. And so I said, you know what? There's one bottle available at this location, literally one. Wow. And I was like, all right. I had a contact that kind of let me know when it was there, and thank you to that contact who shall remain nameless at this point.
Can't reveal your sources.
I can't reveal my sources, but a good source and appreciated. And so I got that bottle home, and I immediately, as we said, opened it up, and I will tell you, my shame dissipated immediately.
And I think the other thing with those is the more conversations you have with rum enthusiasts, a lot of times people will start to say, but the Foursquare's great, but like the ECS releases, they're all around kind of that similar profile. So I don't really feel like I need to get all of them. And I get that perspective because they do kind of have that Foursquare signature. But at the same time, I'll also say that I've never regretted buying one myself. So I see where you're coming from for sure.
It's a phenomenal rum, and I won't talk too much about it now. I'll only say that for 61% ABV, it is really, really drinkable. Had it neat, no problem. And 14 years aged, ex-Madeira and ex-bourbon casks. It is, again, I didn't A/B test it. I didn't try any of my other Foursquares with it last night, but I would say it was immediately one of my favorites.
Nice.
So looking forward to doing more testing with it and seeing how it stacks up to the rest of the collection. But I am happy that I made the purchase overall at the end of the day. So sucker, but I'm a willing sucker.
You got to power through that guilt. It's worth it once you get to the other side and you're sitting back with a nice glass of rum. So cheers. And I'll look forward to hearing how the comparisons go, because that's always fun to do with those releases.
It is.
So I'm glad, by the way, that you brought up Foursquare, because we got an email in a little while ago that has prompted the discussion for this episode. Yeah. So I think we wanted to do an episode around this email because it's a question that I think everyone has at a certain point of getting into rum. And I'll just go ahead and read it. So it came from Pete, and he wrote, "I have been a bourbon drinker for years and took the hobby so far as to being on the Bourbon Pursuit podcast a couple of times. I really like what y'all are doing between a mix of introductory content for newbies like me and the ins and outs of the contemporary rum world. Any advice for a true novice when it comes to rum? I hear you guys recommending something amazing, or I hear you guys recommending some amazing rums, but the selection at my local Total Wine isn't always great, and I'm not quite ready to commit to a $100 bottle. Ever thought of a Rum 201 episode for the refugees of the bourbon world?" So first of all, thanks, Pete, for the email and the compliments. Always great to hear that. But I think what's interesting to me about this email is Pete is kind of asking for recommendation. He calls himself a total novice, but at the same time, like, he's been listening to a rum podcast. Right. He's already had some rums before. I think he mentioned that he'd had some Foursquare rums or something like that. And so, it sounds to me like he's at that stage that I think a lot of people are at, where they've kind of dipped a toe in the water. They've had some of the big brands that people mention, when they're throwing out recommendations at first to people who are really brand new. So maybe, they've had some of the Appletons, the Foursquares, the Mount Gays of the world, really good quality rums, but they're kind of at that stage where they're like, what's next? Where can I go from here to kind of open myself up to the broader world of rum? So we thought that we would each come up with kind of 3 recommendations, all under $100 based on our experience. And our criteria was kind of, what do we think would open someone's eyes to the wider world of rum? What directions can you go in to kind of shift your thinking about the category and that sort of thing? So once you've kind of explored the easier to find items on your shelves, the kind of first wave of recommendations that people give, where do you take things next on your rum journey? So, John, any thoughts or reflections on the email or how we're kind of setting up and framing this episode?
Only to say that I think Pete is me. Like a few years ago. And so when I saw that email, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh yes, I know exactly where he's coming from here, and coming from bourbon into rum, having those first, like you said, first wave of products that you tend to gravitate towards things that are going to give you a bourbon-esque profile because that's what you're used to. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, that's where my love of Foursquare rums came from, and really all Barbados rum, because there is some of that shared there, and that led me into the willingness to now open my mind further into what rum can be beyond that. So I get exactly where Pete's coming from, and I think you framed it perfectly for my thoughts and where I built my list. So I'm ready to drop some knowledge here on our listeners. I don't know if I'd call it knowledge, like just experiential, I guess. For somebody, Pete, that's been exactly where you are a few years ago in my rum journey, here's where I am now, and here's what my recommendations would be. So I'm looking forward to giving those for everyone. Yeah,
and the one caveat I would give with this is, like, that's exactly what these are recommendations. And so everyone taste is subjective, but I tried to gravitate toward things that, like, even if you maybe not necessarily, they're not your cup of tea or they're not your favorite, they'll at least kind of like be an experience that opens you up to, that like broadens kind of your horizons of of what the category is and what it can be and that sort of thing. So also, John and I have not seen each other's recommendations, so this should be pretty interesting. John, do you want to do the honor of going first?
I would be happy to go first, and also it means that I'm more likely to go first in case you have one that I have, just in case, so that I get to say it first. So I like
go
that
for
idea.
it. Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. Damn it.
So here's where I kind of cheated a little bit with how to do this. I didn't just name like one rum. What I did here was a category.
I love how we always cheat with stuff like this, because as you're saying that, that's like I did pretty much the same thing. But please continue.
All right, good. Well, it's our fucking show, so we can do that. So number 3 for me is multi-country blends.
Wait, hold on a second. You said number 3. So are you doing like some kind of reverse countdown or something?
In all honesty, thank you for bringing that up. I guess I was doing reverse countdown, but it really doesn't. The order for me of these top 3 doesn't really matter.
Okay.
I'm not rating these above. Yeah. So the first pick of the 3 would be a good way to say this.
Okay.
Is multi-country blends for rum.
Okay. That entered my mind as one of my potential recommendations, but I didn't do it. So I'm interested to hear why you chose this.
All right, good. So I think that's great. There's a lot of these kind of multi-country blends on the market. I think very, very many out there, and many that don't even actually go into what the blend actually is, probably on purpose, because they're trying to find, decent but very cheap rum product, and it really isn't the strength of their product anyways, or the focus. That's why I think there's a healthy skepticism with blends sometimes in rum and in other products too. Whiskey, a lot of blends are often looked down upon too, whether it's Scotch or bourbon or, American whiskey or whatever. But I think there are some really, really great ones. And here was my point with this. Now that your head's from your bunghole with regards to rum at this point, you can more successfully dive a bit into these multinational rum blends that are the good ones that you can identify, and then help you to expand that rum can be really great blended in multi-country blends, and I think worthwhile to explore. And that's probably not where you've started. As we mentioned before, Pete especially, is probably not where you started. So here's what I wanted to give, and I'm just going to name a few here. I'm not going to talk a lot about each of them, but just to give a few examples. So number 1, probably the most expected and easiest to say, would be Probitas Veritas.
Absolutely.
This is a blend of Jamaican and Barbados rums from Hampton and Foursquare, respectively, that is really lightly aged and expertly blended. And it's cheap. It runs like $30 to $35. It still makes my favorite ever daiquiri to this day. And what's fun about it that I like is I think you can pick out some of both the Jamaican and the Bajan influences very readily. And I love that. It's not just lost into some whatever it is. You really, I think, can feel those too. And also, just as an aside, I think lightly aged straw-colored rums are really underrated by consumers and even rum enthusiasts, so we need more of that.
Yeah, I love that too. There's just something, and it's funny because it seems like something, we always talk about how like color doesn't matter with rum, but there's something so pleasing to me about that like hay, straw-colored. And I think in Probitas that all comes from the Foursquare component.
Right.
If I recall correctly, the Hampton component is completely unaged. But yeah, and like you said, it's the cool part with these multi-country, multi-distillery blends, as you have more and more rum from different places, is kind of like seeing how those components interact with one another and being able to pick out where certain aspects of it are coming from and that sort of thing. So yeah, I strongly considered adding it to my list, but I didn't. So I'm glad that you did, because this is a way for it to get talked about without me having to sacrifice one of my spaces. But I think you said you had some more recommendations, so keep them coming.
Yeah, just a couple more with this category. So one is, and I'll show Will here. Hey, I finally got it. 10
Former
to 1.
Rumcast guest.
Yes. So we had Mark Farrell from 10 to 1 on in December, and I finally got a hold of a Caribbean Dark Rum, his Caribbean Dark Rum, and actually bought the white yesterday. Just haven't tried it yet. The unaged.
Yeah, see, I have the white. I don't have the aged one, though.
So I have tried this one, and I really think this is a really well-done example of a multi-country, in this case, multi-Caribbean country blend, which he has from Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica, and Dominican Republic. Just a superb product. He really has nailed it, I think, with a multi-country blend here, and this should be readily available in a lot of places and not too expensive. A couple other quick ones. Equiano. Of course, if you listen to our episode with Ian Burrell recently, that's a Mauritius Gray's Distillery and Foursquare product. And then finally, Denison's Merchant Reserve or Vatted Dark, which, Will, I think you probably have a little more experience with than I do. I've tasted it, and I know it's a masterful blend from our friends over at EA Shear, but I was curious to see your opinion on that.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the Merchant's Reserve. I actually haven't had any of the other Denizen products yet. I know I've heard interesting things about the vatted dark, which I believe is a blend of Demerara Rum
Yeah.
and Agricole,
And an
right?
Agricole,
From
yeah.
Martinique, yeah.
Yep.
And those are the price range of those is really nice. I think for what you're getting. I mean, I think the vatted dark is like under $25, which
Yeah.
is really cheap. And Merchant's Reserve, I was surprised at how good I thought that rum was just out, because it was like the backstory behind it is it was designed to be kind of the ultimate rum blend for a Mai Tai, right? And so from the get-go, you're thinking of it as a cocktail rum, but it's really, it's good enough to stand on its own outside of cocktails, I think. So yeah, strong recommendations.
Awesome. I really enjoyed the taste of it that I got, and I was like you, surprised at it really does stand up on its own, and it's a really great product at a really great price. The only thing I wish, it does have a screw cap. I'm not a fan.
Don't
of
be
screw
such a
caps,
cap
Will.
elitist. Come on, the screw cap is fine. Like it's easy. I know you don't get the satisfying pop sound and whatever, but I'm about to recommend some screw cap rums. So
Well, you're screwed. But I get it. But I don't know. There's some perceived value to me in my brain that I cannot let go of with screw cap versus corks. That just, honestly, you could probably charge $10 more for that rum if it had a cork in it. So maybe it's best that they keep it a screw cap and keep it at the price it is.
I am fine with that. I would trade a cork for $10 off of a lot of rums. But that's just because I'm not a man of fine tastes, I suppose. And also one final note with that Merchant's Reserve is it's an opportunity to taste a blending component that's pretty uncommon. The lion's share of the blend is an aged Jamaican rum, but the other portion of it is a molasses-based rum from Martinique, which is harder to find. Not a lot of that type of rum being made there, and it's not really what it's thought of. So yeah, good one. So for my first recommendation, this is something that I think is super easy to overlook when you're coming into the rum world, particularly if, like Pete, you're coming in from a bourbon background or any whiskey background, or just there's a lot of emphasis on aged spirits, particularly ones that have that kind of whiskey-esque or whiskey adjacent profile. So what I'm recommending is, again, kind of like you, a category. I want to recommend Jamaican white overproof rums.
Yes.
I said, I think it's really easy to overlook these when you're getting into rum. You kind of go straight past them. You go to the aged Jamaican rums, the aged Barbados rums, etc. But number two, I think when people become more curious about unaged rums, it can be easy to kind of get drawn toward the more boutique offerings out there, the Habitation Velier releases. They have those Hampden single marks, the Worthy Park 502, or maybe to drift toward like Clarin or something like that. And again, I'm not saying like you should ignore or skip those rums. Like if you're curious about those, by all means, everything I just mentioned is a fantastic product, so go for it. But to me, there's something about Jamaican White Overproof. It's such an iconic style of rum. It's such an important type of rum. Whether it's Ray and Nephew, Rumfire, or Rum Bar Overproof, those are kind of the big three. Ray and Nephew, of course, being the oldest one, the biggest seller. Rumfire and Rum Bar Overproof are both newer products. Rumfire being from Hampton, Rum Bar Overproof being from Worthy Park. But again, I think especially if you're not a cocktail person, it's easy to look past those because it's like, well, I don't really make cocktails. What else am I going to do with this? But to me, it's part of kind of the foundation of understanding what rum is and what it can be. So go get one of those bottles even before you make a cocktail with it. Just experience it on its own. Try some neat. It's okay if drinking it neat doesn't become an everyday experience for you. I don't think those are everyday sippers, to borrow a term that gets used a lot for most people. But to me, again, that's less of what it's about. I think it's going to kind of open up the way you experience the aged rums from those producers as well, whether you've experienced some aged Hamptons or aged Worthy Parks or Appletons, etc. Also, you can make super delicious simple cocktails with all of those rums is the great thing. Whether it's Ray and Ting or...
Right, 2-ingredient cocktails
exactly.
like Ray and Ting.
Exactly. I ran across this super easy recipe. It was on Shannon Mustafer's Instagram. She wrote a really wonderful cocktail book called Tiki a year or two ago. And I believe it was an ounce of Overproof white Jamaican rum. So you can use any of those 3. 2 ounces of pineapple juice, half an ounce of simple syrup, which I dialed back just slightly in mine. And you just mix those over ice, and then you top with grapefruit soda like Ting. I actually didn't have any grapefruit soda on hand, but I did have ginger beer. So I used ginger beer instead, and it was fantastic. It was great. I'm probably going to make that later today. But so that is my first recommendation, Jamaican White Overproof. Get one of those 3 bottles. I think my own personal preference veers a little toward Rumfire personally, but they're all wonderful products, and each has their own kind of unique differences. So grab one of those. I don't think you'll regret. It'll certainly at least be a unique experience.
Well, like you, Will, I almost put this on my list. So
nice.
I'm glad you did. I had kind of thought about it slightly differently in looking at high ester unaged rums.
Okay.
Which I think those, would qualify for as well. I like the way that you put it also. You mentioned, I think, very accurately exactly the mindset of somebody like a Pete or me coming from the bourbon world and passing right by those because that's not what you're into.
Right.
And so it's like, you're like, that's nothing like what I would look to sip, and I'm a sipper, and I'm not even really going to need those.
These have screw caps.
Yeah. And even the marketing is very different in the way they're marketed. So, like instinctively, I knew that those were very popular products and good products. I just didn't feel like they were for me when I first came into rum. And, how wrong I was, I think, that's not the case. And that, as you said, these aren't really sippers, but man, they are so beautiful in their expression and so well crafted and really worthy of experiencing all on their own. And so I think it's a great pick and a perfect kind of segue into something else that really broadens your horizons with rum.
And I would say maybe even don't go into it with the expectation of like, oh, this is something I won't ever want to sip, because I know plenty of people who do just sit back with a little glass of those neat.
I do now, not often, but I do. I recently had a little, probably half-ounce pour of Ray and Nephew neat and enjoyed it very much.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, once you get there, it takes a little bit of acclimating, I think, maybe. But yeah, it's really good stuff. All right, on to my number 2. So very in line with your number 3, Will. Another category here that is similar in some ways. So I'm going with the category of Haitian rum.
Ah, okay, very nice.
And I picked that partially because exactly the same reasoning for you about expanding your horizons at this point. This is rum 201 or 301 or whatever we want to call it.
We're blurring the lines here with this.
Yes, exactly. But, I think by now you have a liking for rum and you're willing to press some of those boundaries.
Yeah.
So I think Haitian rum fits that role very well. And I'm saying Haitian rum and not just Clarin on purpose, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But let's start with Clarin, which is, you mentioned it already, so you stole a little bit of my thunder, but that's okay. So Clarin, the unaged cane juice rum that's produced locally in Haiti, which it's produced in such a way that the terroir and the cane is really featured in the rum.
Absolutely.
So it's a bit raw and a bit wild, but maybe in all the best possible ways. When I came from bourbon, where I thought a lot of rules, and I stuck mostly when I came into those molasses aged rums like we talked about, that reminded me of the bourbon profile, I finally got to try these Clarins, and I think my brain broke.
Yeah, it's definitely like, if your experience goes from aged molasses-based rums to Clarin, you really truly start to get a sense of just how broad the category of rum is.
Exactly. I did this with tasting with someone who came to the house. Actually, we're finally starting to have some visitors come back. Had somebody try some of these Clarins who was very much in a similar way with other spirits and not really as much into rum, except for the ones and he was like, what? Yeah. he could not believe it. Like, I had to show him the bottle and all this stuff, and he's like, this is rum? And I'm like, yep. And it is freaking great. So in terms of what's out there is the La Maison and Vellier Clarins, which they do all by the different distilleries or local varieties. And there's at least 4 out there now, maybe coming soon as a 5th, I heard. So I can't wait for that, because I have a few of these bottles now. I'm Team Sajus. Will, I don't know if you have a team.
Yeah, I'm Team Saju as well. I know it's kind of, I feel like it's almost like a consensus take at this point, but
No, I don't think
you don't
so.
think so?
No, I saw this on a recent thread on, I think it was Reddit, where they were talking about Clarins and people were going back and forth with like Harry Potter houses at this point, like Team Sajus and Team Vaval and Team Casimir. So yes, Sajus was one of the more popular ones, but Vaval was also very popular as well, and then Le Rocher was also very popular as well. Casimir seemed to be running in fourth. But I have that bottle, and I have to say, if I had started with it, I really like that one a lot and would have not known otherwise. It's really great also.
Well, and I think what's also interesting is people I've talked to can sometimes have pretty strong preferences, either likes or dislikes, just among those four, which again speaks to what you were saying earlier of, these are coming from the same place, a lot of times produced in similar style, but the experience between them can range vastly.
Yeah, the microclimates that are there where these are being produced is and the terroir is really featured. So
and different cane varietals as well.
Yes, and so you get to go. For me, I love going back and forth with things, and I really like all of these. Also, I'll give a shout out. Saint Benevolence is also a really great product that makes a Clarin that may be available in some areas where maybe those other La Maison and Villiers are not. All of these are under $50. They might get close to $50 in some cases, but I think really worthwhile, even for a lot of people to see an unaged rum and they think, gosh, that's a lot of money for an unaged rum. Well, maybe they do.
Well, but I think the comparison you have to make is think about them the way you might think about a mezcal or something like that. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, these are actually pretty affordable.
Right. I agree completely. And so I would urge anybody at this level that we're talking about now in their rum journey, you really need to find those. They may be a little tougher to find than some of the other recommendations we had talked about, but worthwhile to do so. And you can definitely find them online somewhere that'll get those to you.
I would also throw out there real quick, another new bottle I've been seeing more of around is Clarin Milot. Which comes from, I think the producer's name is Patrick Saint-Serine. I'm probably butchering these kind of French pronunciations here, but I sat in on a presentation from the company that is sourcing that and partnering with him, and I haven't tasted it yet, but it was a really fascinating presentation, and seemed like another just a cool way to experience the Clarins of Haiti.
Before I finish, Will, I just want to carve out a little time to also say I said Haitian rum because I also feel that rum barbancourt is also worthy of exploration at this point and may sometimes be overlooked. I could be wrong there, and maybe people are like, of course, barbancourt's everywhere. But I do feel like, especially with the 15-year, as a sipper for $50 roughly, it's a really great product overall. And I think that those Haitian rums and that barbancourt rum is unique. If you want to hear more about that, we did also have an episode. I didn't intend for this to run back through all of our episodes that we've talked about already, but I mean, I guess to an extent we curate the list of who we talk to, so we like
it's
that.
It's informed
product.
Sometimes, by taste.
Right.
Yeah, well, and I think that can be another reason why you might overlook barbancourt, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding or not misunderstanding, but confusion just as to like what exactly it is.
Right.
Like it's a cane juice rum. It's from Haiti, but it's not Clarin.
Right.
It's it's really nowhere close to what Clarin is like at all. And at the same time, you associate Haiti, French speaking country. But this is cane juice rum, but it's not agricole.
Not
either.
agricole, exactly.
And we discussed, a lot of that on the interview that we did. So go back and check that out if you're interested in learning more. But interestingly, I just did a little kind of blind rum sampling experience for my sister-in-law and her boyfriend. And I had 4 rums out there. One was Barbancourt 8-year. So
okay.
I think... how many stars is that? Is that 4-star?
4-star, I think.
I think so.
That's off memory. Yeah.
And there were 3 other. I can't remember what all else was out there, but that was their favorite of the bunch.
It's
tasted blind.
It's a great
so
product.
There you go.
Yeah. If you're listening to our show right now, there are 6 words about rum that are likely to catch your eye: single barrel, cask strength, and no additives. Those 6 words are the whole premise of the single cask rum releases from Holmes Key, the sponsor for this episode of the Rumcast. Holmes Key seeks out the world's best rums and releases them unadulterated and at cask strength in limited editions. Check out their website at homeskey.com to learn more about their new 2021 releases, distilled at places like Foursquare in Barbados, Demerara Distillers in Guyana, Travelers Liquors in Belize, and Clarin Distillery in Jamaica. Also, you'll definitely want to stay tuned for more exciting 2021 releases coming up very soon. You can find out more at Holmes Key, that's HOLMESCAY.com. Now back to the show. All right, Will, what's your number 2?
Okay, so number 2 for me is Demerara Rum outside of the core El Dorado lineup.
Okay.
So when I'm thinking of like iconic places in rum or just unique, just kind of one of one distilleries and stuff like that, that distillery, Demerara Distillers Limited, is one of the first that comes to mind. The style of Demerara rum is, first of all, just entirely unique within the rum world. There's really nothing else like it. The collection of stills and history at that distillery is so incredible. You know, they have stills going back hundreds of years. The Port Morant, wooden pot still, the Versailles still, which is also a wooden pot still, the Inmore still, continuous wooden coffee column still. And it's such an interesting place. And it's funny because I think the way that people are introduced to it a lot of times is through the El Dorado brand. And when you taste those components on their own outside of that, it's almost like a completely different experience. And I think the challenge can be that it's hard to find those components, particularly if you're in the United States at an affordable price point.
Right.
You're normally going to find those rums from independent bottlers. Although I do want to point out that El Dorado does have a single still collection. So they're in kind of those same bottles as the El Dorado lineup, those kind of squat, short bottles with a short kind of curvy neck. And
I saw them in my Total Wine recently.
Yeah,
so they're there in a lot of places.
Yeah, they are. And, one part of the reason I recommend outside of that core El Dorado lineup is there is some element of sweetening in those El Dorado rums. And I think there's been a lot of kind of debate as to the source of that. I know in numerous interviews, El Dorado has said that comes from aging with caramel in the barrels. And I think there's a variance in terms of like how much people accept that explanation or not. I don't really want to get into that debate necessarily. They have said that they're phasing out that practice. And there was actually a pretty interesting article recently on Rum Revelations that compared like a newer bottle of El Dorado 15 with an older bottle of El Dorado 15 and how considerably less sweet the newer bottle was. So all that aside though, if you can find single still expressions from outside that core El Dorado range, it's such a fascinating kind of night and day experience to go from what those taste like to what these stills kind of taste like on their own, without anything being added or being sweetened in any way. And so a few brands that you may be able to hunt down. There are some Transcontinental Rum line releases over the years that, and sometimes it can be difficult to nail down exactly like which still the release came from with that line, but I wouldn't let that stop you. Just give it a try, grab a bottle if you can find one and see what you think of it. That Boutique Rum Company, which is almost exclusively distributed in Europe, but it's possible to get your hands on some of those releases in the US. They've put out some affordable releases from single stills of that collection. Obviously, I know we had the $100 price point rule, but the Holmes Key Port Morant release is really, really good.
Or the iFlot.
I haven't had that one yet.
Oh, it's good.
But yeah, I've heard good things from you.
Yeah, it's
and
good.
I just think it's such a distinctive, unduplicatable type of rum that it's really worth seeking out. And it's also used in so many blends out there. So being able to taste something like the Port Morant still on its own, you'll start to recognize it when it's used in other contexts.
I want to disagree with you so bad on one of these, Will, but I haven't found it yet. The only thing I will say is I found in my personal experience with some of those, you mentioned the variations that they have. I can't even remember the name of the series that Eldorado has that has those different versions of it, I guess you would say. But I found some to be better than others, I guess. And I don't know how to distinguish that. And the price point was kind of a barrier because for me, looking at those, I remember some of them are in the 70s, 80s, for me at least, price. And having tasted some of them that I felt like I liked more, certain stills more than others or certain profiles more than others, I'm not really willing to take a gamble on $70 or $80 bottles, not knowing really which ones I really gravitate towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing with the Eldorado single still line, which I mentioned earlier, is I think those are typically around like $90. And
right.
For me personally, they're all 80 proof. So spending that much on 80 proof is something that I don't usually do, which also may be why I haven't purchased any of those yet. But
yeah,
I think what you shared just now is not uncommon at all. Like I think the experience you have, not just from like still to still or blend to blend, but right. also just like release to release from certain independent bottlers, it can vary a lot. Like I've had samples of some of those transcontinental releases that I was like, this is okay. Like it's not blowing my mind or anything.
Right.
And I've had other ones that I like are incredible. So I think that's kind of the mindset I would go into it with, is just like, this is such a unique place and it's hard to get a hold of tasting it in that context sometimes. To me, it's worth it to just be able to try it, even if I'm paying $60, $70 for something that might not end up being my favorite, just being able to have some idea of what that overall profile from the distillery is like, it's like a notch on the rum knowledge belt, I guess, just being able to have some idea of it. And sooner or later you'll probably come across at least one that really stands out to you.
Oh, I remember what it is. It's the single barrel. So it's discontinued now, but Eldorado had a single barrel, like tall bottle that was from one still as well, because it mentioned it had different ones, and on the label I believe it said what it was from. But yeah, those single barrel releases is what I was thinking of, and I don't know that you can get a hold of those as much anymore, but I do know there's some dusty bottles still around, because I've seen them floating around online, some pictures. People will ask, what is this? I've never seen it before.
Yep.
And those are still on the expensive side, but if you see them, you probably want to grab them at this point, because those are not coming back. And that's kind of a piece of rum history. No additives as well to that. So that's an interesting one to maybe also fits in that category.
All right. So what do we have at number 3?
Okay. So my third pick here, I'm rubbing my hands together right now because I know that this one for Will is going to be interesting. All right. Ready, Will?
I'm ready.
American rum.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I feel like I beat you to it a little bit.
No, I wasn't going to be that guy.
Oh, okay, fine. Whatever. You already are that guy, really, Will. I'm going to talk a little bit about American rum here, and then I'm going to rely upon you to give the depth of knowledge because I know you have it.
Go for it.
So here's what I'm thinking about specifically with American rum. So I'm kind of actually in this category, I'm whittling it down quite a bit. I'm talking about single cask or barrel finish / secondary maturation American rum products.
Okay. Why are you gravitating specifically to that?
Well, so I think it fits with our theme. So it's not that you can't grab a bunch. There's some really great American rums out there. And honestly, if you haven't explored those at this point, you really should. So we can just stop there and say that that's one of them. But what I'm pointing out here for people that are at this stage of their rum journey is you can find some really interesting single cask variations or barrel finish variations of American rum products that are not too expensive, that really allow you to get into almost exactly what you were talking about with the Guyana rums. You get a better appreciation for a specific distillery in a way that you can't otherwise do when you start to explore some of those variations in a tighter way. So here, I'll give you an example of what I'm thinking of. Privateer's Distiller's Drawer series.
Okay, yeah.
So those may be a little more difficult to source, but I know they're out there. And again, I know like places like Sealbox, Sarasota Liquor Locker, Astor Wines, and others do have those available still. Many of the releases, I think there's over 100 different ones now that they've done over the years. Many of those are no longer available, but there are some out there that are still available. I haven't tried a bad one yet. I do think some are better than others, but that's going to be subjective. But what I love about the Distiller's Drawer series is that they're experimental. They tell you right up front, hey, look, this is a single barrel experiment, and whether it's Maggie Campbell or Dylan or some of the others that are produced there, they go into depth in what is the aim of what they tried to do with this specific barrel, and what they then name it creatively, like Sea Smoke or something like the Rum Glow, so that you get this specific profile. And what I like to do about that, what I really enjoy, is taking one of those and putting it next to another one or next to another one, and then just getting the variations out of that, which I think is really fun, but also takes me to the next level in my rum journey and understanding of a product at a closer in level.
So one thing that's interesting to me that sticks out is what you said. I feel like I hear the opposite a lot in terms of cost and affordability. You know, people speak a lot of the craft tax with American rum producers, just because, you know, a lot of times these are very new, young distilleries. So they're releasing aged products that are typically significantly younger than what you can get out of the Caribbean or, you know, other places that have been producing rum longer. And so a lot of times there's a little bit of sticker shock in terms of what you're getting.
But specifically with those privateer Distiller's Drawer, yes, a lot of them are young, age 2 years, age 3 years, something along those lines. I think they have a bottled in bond that's up to 5. But interestingly for me, for my palate, those hang in with some of those 10 and 12 and 15-year aged Caribbean rums in a great way. Maybe that's a testament to what they've been doing, you know, and how they've been doing it and the care that they've been taking with it. Maybe it's something else. I don't know. But I do think they are, even though they're younger aged, I would say absolutely worthwhile and really, really great sippers.
Yeah, I think, you know, age is just a number. And so I'm definitely...
Thank you, Aaliyah.
I'm not trying to say that, like, you know, I think what they're charging is too much or anything like that. I mean, a lot of times it comes down to economics of running a distillery. Like, it's tough. And the whole reason I pointed out, like, saying I didn't want to be that guy is just because, you know, many listeners will know I run a newsletter called American Rum Report. So I write about the American rum category a lot out of curiosity and interest, and just trying to make it easier for people to explore, because there's so many producers in the U.S. that are making rum. It's interesting because there are so many producers, but at the same time, from a volume perspective, it's not like the United States is from a craft distillery perspective is making in terms of volume more rum than other places. Of course, that's leaving out you know, like Bacardi, for example, which is in the United States because Puerto Rico is part of the United States, and places in the USVI and stuff like that. But so obviously I share the enthusiasm, and I definitely think it's a region worth exploring. But I don't know. I think a lot of times people's impression is because I have the American Rum Report website that I think like American rum is the best and it's like better, you know, America, you know, that kind of thing, which is totally not my view at all. I you know, just wanted to write about something that's close to me. And I do think there are some really, really super fascinating stuff going on here in the United States. So definitely co-sign on that.
You mentioned Puerto Rican rums, which was the other one that I was going to mention here that falls into the same thing, which is, I'll just give you another example, Don Q or Don Q, depending on how you want to say it. They have their line of a vermouth finish and a sherry cask finish.
And some single barrel stuff.
Yeah, the single barrel, which I have the 2005 and the 2007, and I believe there's a 2009 out. Those are all very good priced, pretty readily available. And again, what I feel like is the important piece here is not only that you're exploring American rum, but that you're exploring the derivations or the uniqueness, branches, whatever you want to call it, of a similar distillate profile. Or the same distillate, and what happens when you now put it into different barrels or do, you know, different years and different batches and things like that. And I think that's where my brain goes to when I say, where are you jumping in your next piece of your rum journey? It's there. It's how do you now gain a closer in understanding of what a distillery can do, and that's how you do it. And I think American Rum is a great place to start with that. There's plenty of others, of course. There's Panama Grander does this. They have some different finishes. Redoubtable actually does as well. Of course, they probably have some added sugar in the Redoubtable, but it's a really great line of the Oloroso versus the cognac cask, and they have that even in a gift pack, I think. So there are other places, but I think that American Rum is a great place to start to do this and to explore that in the way that I'm talking about. So that's why I have it on the list, yeah.
Well, and also to go off of that, one of the things that's interesting to me about the category is that when you are consuming something from a distillery that is relatively new, so like, 15 years or younger, a lot of times they're having to try lots of different things and making quick changes on the fly. They're kind of rapidly evolving, right? So you kind of get to be there at the beginning to taste through that evolution with them. And when you find someone who is really dedicated to the craft and really all in on the category of rum, whether that's, a producer like a Privateer or Richland is another one like that.
Yeah.
We talked about Kohana on the previous episode, but another point on that is that is something I think the craft distilling industry has really taken off in the US over the past, 15 years or so. But you're starting to see new rum distilleries pop up in other places, not just the mainland United States. Mohoba is one that we've talked about in South Africa. And I think you kind of see the same thing with the products that they put out. They put out a lot of varied, different, unusual kinds of products.
Right.
And you see distilleries kind of doing that. And sometimes there's a good side and a bad side to it too. I think a lot of times people can associate kind of gimmicky stuff with craft distilleries, craft brewing as well. You see stuff that's like, experimentation just to like try to do something weird and
something nobody's done before.
Yeah, and it doesn't always necessarily come out good. But I do think that's something really interesting. And also you're starting to see more of that craft distillery movement in Puerto Rico as well. I've mentioned San Juan Distillers before, which is growing sugarcane, doing fresh cane juice rum down there. It's really fascinating how they're doing it. They're super dedicated, all in on rum. Frank Ward they brought Frank Ward in to help them out and consult with them. So they're kind of coming to it.
They are serious.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there are some exciting things to experience in that respect. And to kind of transition into my third recommendation, because it bleeds into that one a little bit. But I was going to recommend rum from a place that you don't typically associate with rum. And so there's a mix of that. There are plenty of places that you don't necessarily first associate with rum that have been around for a while and have a long history. There are also ones with more recent histories or revived histories, like the US, for example.
Right.
But then you also have the Fijis, the Australias, the Africas, for example, where it's you don't know about it just because we're ignorant to things going on in kind of far-flung places where that aren't distributed as much in the United States, but are becoming a little more accessible over the years. But I think all of those places, what's cool to me about those experiences is they're eye-opening. A lot of times you're just like, wow, I didn't know A, that this was being made here, and B, that it had this long history of being produced here, just like in the episode we did on Australia with Steve McGarry. And again,
or Paranubis in Mexico.
Exactly.
That fits the bill exactly. Yeah.
Mexico, exactly. Yeah. It's not like people just started making rum there, just like Francisco told us.
Right.
Jose Luis, his family goes back 3 generations of making aguardiente de caña in Mexico. So, and there's just something to me that is so cool about experiencing that for the first time and being like, wow, not only is this just like a new kind of unique profile in terms of flavor, it's also just like, I didn't know this was going on. I didn't know there was all this history. And, people talk about rum being the most diverse spirit, the most global spirit. And those are those moments that I think contribute to that feeling of just how broad the category is. So that would be my final one. And again, it bleeds into yours a little bit. It's almost at the point where it's like wherever you are in the world, you could just find somewhere that's local to you. Because like I said, even in Europe now, I'm seeing, I feel like, announcements of new rum distilleries almost every week. And, while I wouldn't say that's like the best place to start with rum, I would definitely kind of go to like the cradles of rum before. But there's something really fun and interesting about just being able to like look at the place down the street and get to know their story and how they're trying to bring their own perspective to rum and how they're figuring out their style and that sort of thing. It's cool. It's interesting to me.
Rum is the global spirit, right? At least that's the way I see it. Rum is the global spirit. Bourbon tends to be very categorized into a certain specific section of the United States. So it's really opening that up, and as you're experiencing your rum journey, you're broadening into an entire world of options. And many of those, to your point, Will, are well known to start with, whether it's in the Caribbean or some of the other ones that make a lot of rum that we are well known. But there's so many out there that, even you and I, Will, we get we talk rum a lot, obviously, and we still get surprised.
Oh, totally.
By they're the Japanese rums and the Okinawan rums, and there's one in the Netherlands now, and in Scotland even that's
Rummy
making
Club.
rum.
That's the one in the Netherlands, right? Yeah.
And Scotland is ninefold, I think, I want to say. And then Japanese, 9 leaves. And Okinawa has core. All of these I haven't tried or haven't been able to experience yet. But I know that they're, from what I've heard, seen, and talked to people about, they bring their own piece to the conversation. So this isn't just rum, like vodka. When I think of vodka, I know there's probably slight variations of vodka, so I don't want to be too glib. But like vodka's vodka, for the most part. It's like the goal is just to like be like a spirit that you don't taste. But when you're talking rum and you're talking about all these different countries and the difference in climates and terroir and cane varieties and processes and stills, and there's so many variables, as we've talked about before, that it's such a cool thing to be able to explore the entire world worth of this global spirit. So a great recommendation and a pretty seamless transition there. Almost like we planned that, and I swear we didn't in our list, but yeah, that flowed really well.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, I'm just constantly reminded that I'm just scratching the surface, right? There's so much to explore. I think we always try to be pretty forthright in that we don't consider ourselves the world's, foremost rum experts. There's plenty of people out there who already know more about rum than I'll ever forget, probably. Yeah,
but we're way down the list, Will.
Exactly.
We're way down the list.
But I think that's what's so fun about it is being able to go through that, personal journey with it and just constantly, the learning never stops, the new experiences never stop. So I'm always excited to see what I'm gonna learn next with rum, and so hopefully this makes it a little easier if you're kind of not getting started, but you've gotten started and you're kind of wondering what's next. Hopefully you found some interesting stuff in this episode, and if you did, definitely let us know about it. Hit us up on social media, send us an email, host@rumcast.com. We always say we love getting emails. It's great to be able to use them to fuel episodes like this. So yeah, let us know about your experiences. Let us know what you would recommend to someone in Pete's shoes. Maybe we can fire off a few more recommendations on a future episode. But John, anything to add before we wrap up?
No, we love hearing from you on social media too. Make sure we're on Instagram and Facebook primarily. Send us a picture or of what you've made recently or what rums you're experiencing, or let us know what we might have missed on these lists that you really think should be added on, so that we can add that on. Also, we'll recommend on our website, we've been carefully expanding the list of rum societies.
That's right.
As we go, and I've been seeing a few new ones that have popped up, and Will has done a diligent job of adding those. So we're adding those as we go. And if you know of one or you're a part of a rum society that's not yet on that list at rumcast.com, you should go there and make sure it is, so that other people can find you. And we're hoping to continue that as a resource, again, worldwide.
Absolutely, yeah. And you brought up a good point in that the only sure thing about this episode is that we totally did overlook and miss some stuff. So, I mean, it's funny because I had like several more things I had to kind of whittle it down, but I mean, rum agricole is a whole other category that I think it's overlooked a lot, and it's easy to not dive into it. So we definitely, I know we left off some stuff that is absolutely worthy of exploration, but we tried to keep it to 3. Constraints make things more interesting. So apologies to anything that got left out. This is by no means an exhaustive definitive list, but that's part about what makes rum so fun. Is it's too broad to whittle it down into a pithy little series of 6 recommendations. So even when we cheat on them and just make them kind of categorical as opposed to single bottle or release recommendations. So
we're 26 episodes in and we're still scratching the surface, right? So
that's right. I mean, sometimes I look back at our list of guests and I'm like, how have we not got someone from here on yet? And so I feel this sense of urgency to make our episode line up representative and as diverse as the category itself. So that's something we're always trying to get better at and make sure we're being representative of everyone and all the cultures that are contributing to rum. So on that note, I can't wait to see where we go next. So we'll be back soon with I think our next episode might be from another country that I think people tend to overlook or not know as much about. So I'm excited for that. So
#spoilers.
Yeah. Well, no,
nice.
I'm hiding the spoilers. It's a
that's
teaser.
true. Hashtag no
teaser.
spoilers. Yeah, teaser. There you go.
Until then, I'll talk to you then, John.
Alrighty.